We acknowledge the original owners of the land on which we podcast, whose stories were told for thousands of years. Today, we are recording in Meanjin. We pay our respects to elders past and present who may be listening. Sovereignty was never ceded. A quick note before we get started that there may be some swearing in today's podcast. If you don't like swearing or usually listen with children in the car, you have been warned. This episode of What in the NDIS Now is brought to you by Astalty. Astalty is the software solution for NDIS professionals built by NDIS professionals. Astalty is my go-to software, and Astalty is trusted and loved by hundreds of other NDIS providers. I love how easy it is to use and how it keeps all my participant information, notes, and invoicing all in one place, available to me anytime from any device. Sign up now for your 14-day free trial. Head to astalty.com.au to sign up now. See for yourself how much easier managing all your NDIS business needs are by using Astalty. Thanks again to Astalty for sponsoring today's episode. You're listening to What in the NDIS Now, a podcast where I, Hannah Redford, and my friend Sam Rosenbaum interview participants and providers about all things NDIS. Hi Sam, how are you going?
Yeah, really well, Hannah. Yourself?
I'm really excited. We have our very first repeat guest, other than our live shows. I know we've had repeat guests on our live shows, but on the normal feed, we've got our very first repeat guest, and it is the great Shaun Bickley. Welcome back, Shaun.
Hi.
We are so excited. For those who don't remember, Shaun was back in episode 48. And Shaun has a campaign to abolish subminimum wage. So, Shaun, for those who don't remember or didn't listen recently to that episode, can you give us, in a bit of a nutshell, a bit about your campaign?
Yeah, so in Australia, it's legal to pay disabled people $3.01 an hour, even though the minimum wage for everyone else is $24.10 an hour. And we think that's really unfair. And so I've been organizing a campaign to try to change the laws for the past just over 3 years now. And it's been very slow going, but we've gotten a lot more momentum very recently in the past, I guess, 6 months or so. So we now have 42 national organizations, 247 state and local organizations, 19 senators and MPs, 41 state and territory MPs, 154 councillors, and almost 2,400 individuals who've signed on. We also had, I think, 297 candidates who had signed on. I just deleted the candidates in the last update. But I've got the number somewhere. It was just short of hitting. It was 3 short of hitting the next milestone. So it's taken a while because I started it by myself as just a random disabled person without an organization behind me, and now there's a lot more support nationally for it.
Yeah. So, for example, since we last spoke, you've started an advocacy org, which is really awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, 2 other things happened before that happened as well. In October, the city of Victoria Park, WA, became the first city in Australia to pass a procurement ban. So that means that they will not do business with any sheltered workshops, any Australian disability enterprises that pay less than minimum wage, which is a de facto ban on all of them because by definition, they all pay less than minimum wage. And so that happened in October. And then in November was a really big one, and that was the city of Sydney. And they passed a ban on essentially everything: procurement, support, funding to any business that pays less than the national minimum wage. So not just ADEs, but any business paying less than minimum wage under any circumstances. And that got a lot of attention when that happened. Around the same time, I spent about 6 months making a constitution and getting input from most disabled people that I knew who were interested in creating input, and pulled a board together and started an organization called Our Fair Go. And so Our Fair Go is a disabled-led and disabled-run organization. So all of its voting membership is disabled people, and all of its board is and will be disabled. And our focus is on employment and disabled people's rights at work. So that includes a focus on subminimum wage, but also forced and coerced work.
Oh, wow. Adding in the forced and coerced work is really important. I am so glad that you have included that. So, who can be a member of Our Fair Go?
So we have two kinds of membership. So to be a full member, you have to have a disability. Well, there's a couple of criteria. You have to have a disability. You have to live in Australia. You have to be at least 14. I don't expect many teenagers, but our rationale was if they're old enough to go to work and be paid subminimum wage, they're old enough to join and advocate for better labor conditions if they want to. I've known, in a couple decades, I've known like 2 or 3 teenagers who are interested in that. So it's possible. But essentially the main criteria is that they have to be disabled. So it's not something, it allows us self-determination so that we are calling the shots and we are making our own decisions about what it is that we want. We have another kind of membership called supporting membership, and this is for family members and other allies. And they have speaking rights. They can attend meetings. They can talk. They can give us advice, but they don't vote. And that's a distinction that allows, I guess, our greater support networks to participate and be included and give us the benefit of their experience, but still allow us to make our own decisions.
I think that's really good, and embeds the fundamentals of nothing without us, or nothing for us without us, straight from a governance perspective in a charity sense. I really, and locking it in from that sort of point on a members is really helps ensure that the direction always maintains true to that along the road. And it also sort of emphasizes the idea of people that come into the sectors, such as organizations like myself, my own organization with consulting and stuff, that is always going to remember that we're providing a service to people at the end of the day, and we shouldn't be making decisions around what that service is without understanding what the needs actually are.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing about us without us. It has been a principle of the disability rights community for decades. I also drew, when I was creating this, a lot of principles of disability justice. So the disability justice movement was founded in the United States by Black, brown, and queer disabled people. And it's a bit different. A lot of nonprofits will use it as a buzzword or a replacement for disability rights. They'll use it to sound more buzzwordy, I guess, but it means something different. So disability justice means working outside the system or outside laws building support networks, that sort of thing. That's not what we're doing here. We're kind of explicitly, for the most part, lobbying and advocating to government and changing laws. But that doesn't mean we can't use ideas and principles from those who came before us, whether we're talking about the disability justice movement of the 2000s or disability rights movement of the 1970s. So one of those principles is leadership of the most impacted. And a lot of people would ask me, well, how are you going to determine who is disabled enough to join as a full member? And I'm like, we're not. We're just not even going to go there. If somebody says that they're disabled, that's fine. They can join, because there's really no ethical way for me to be the gatekeeper of who is and isn't disabled, or for anyone else to do that. It's just not. It's not a plausible scenario. And if that means that there's people who maybe aren't really that disabled, fine. But there's also going to be people who probably should be members who don't want to identify as such, and they're going to join as supporting members. And that happens as well. But what we can do is enshrine the idea that people who are most impacted should have a greater say. Regardless of whether or not you have a disability, if somebody else actually works at a shelter workshop or has worked at a shelter workshop, maybe they should be speaking first, or we should weigh their thoughts on this topic a little bit more. And so that way, it doesn't really matter. We don't have to go around about trying to gatekeep or figure those things out, but we can kind of exist and look at what people's experiences are on whatever issue we're looking at.
Yeah, so it's like self-inflicted code of honor / respect ethos.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that the disability community is a lot younger. I mean, disabled people have been around forever, but as an advocacy movement, we're a lot younger than a lot of other movements, and so we're still figuring out a lot of things that other communities have already resolved. But these are things that we can draw on what we've learned from past experience, from other sorts of communities, and we can figure it out as we go along. A lot of this is something that I think is a little bit experimental, and some of it's stuff that I know other countries have done. And so we're just kind of putting these together and doing our best to make it work.
So who can be part of the board? I know you've got board elections coming up soon. So who can be part of the board?
So that's really cool. So we have a couple of things there. So we're looking at having a board, a director, delegate from every state and territory. But we're also looking at having, based on what's in our constitution, we have one from every state and territory. We have one rural or regional member, but also 1/3 of the board needs to have an intellectual disability. At least one needs to have experience being paid subminimum wage in a shelter workshop, one with prison labor, and one in a program like Work for the Dole or the Community Development Program or something similar like that. So it does tend to lend itself to a larger board. This could be a board of up to 17 people, which is more typical of what I've seen of boards that include larger numbers of people with intellectual disabilities. And it's funny because the people that were advising me against that were telling me, the board won't be able to make swift decisions or, emergency decisions. And my response was that there are no emergency decisions in employment policy. There are no life or death decisions that need to be made about any of these topics. And so everything that's written into the Constitution is about slowing down decision making. No decision other than elections, because that's just a thing, can be made in the same meeting it's brought up. So even if I would like to, it's constitutionally forbidden. So if something comes up in a meeting, everyone has to receive the written resources, get at least a month to process it, and then the earliest it can be voted on would be the next meeting. And this is because a lot of cognitively disabled people, whether they have an intellectual disability or not, don't respond well to being pressured and put on the spot and made to make a decision. I don't have an intellectual disability, but I've been in a lot of board situations, or more often, not a board, but something I've been appointed to, where something's come up and I've been like pressured to make a decision on the spot. And then I think about it a few days later and I'm like, I don't really like the decision I made now that I've had a chance to process it. And so we want to try to avoid that and make it more accessible for people. And that means sacrificing speed, but I think that's a lot better and fairer. So to answer your question, a lot more people with intellectual disabilities, people around the country, and people who have been to prison and been paid some wage, people who have been in shelter workshops and been paid some wage, people who've done work for the Dole or the community development program in rural areas and been paid some wage.
I really love the thought that you've taken in developing all of this. Part of my role in consulting is working through a lot of these ideas on where community organizations have really good fundamentals but want certain things to happen, and how do they get happen. One of the famous lines is death by committee. And I think that's probably what a lot of people that were hesitating against doing this would have been cautioning about. But I really love, the ambition. I have had some very ridiculous, over the top sort of grandiose, how do we make everyone an equal player without giving them the money in the shares for the company type of thing, or equal like employee shares and all kinds of I want this to work, and as well with some community settings on how do we help everyone type of thing without destroying ourselves. But I really love that you're going, no, we want to have that voice. We want to delay the ability to actually have make a forced decision as part of something that we can't do for the reasons of what we're actually trying to establish and our member base. I think that definitely is something a little bit more refreshing, and I'm glad that you push back on anyone that kind of said otherwise there.
Yeah, well, it helps that I was staff for an organization the board was 100% people with intellectual disabilities, and they had 21 people with intellectual disabilities. This was in Texas, and it functioned as long as there was decent facilitation and people actually received materials ahead of time. And I'm familiar with a similar organization in Scotland as well. So I know that it can be done with even more people on the board, So yeah, I think it's totally doable. I would like to have board elections now because I just want to just distribute workload, but everyone still has election fatigue. So we're kind of waiting for that to fizzle out a bit. And potentially, we might be attending Disability Pride in Sydney at the end of July. And so if we're doing that, then it would make sense to wait so that we're not you can participate in this great organization, but we've already done the board elections. So, wait, good luck next year. But yeah, I would like to do it, as soon as those two things are sorted. We did agree when we set up the organization that the elections would happen between July and November. And I don't know why it was I don't know why that was part of the registration process. And this is a very specific window, but okay. So yeah, it will happen between July and November because it has to. But so maybe August or September. I don't know.
Well, I do remember all the challenges around elections of boards and all that fun jazz within organizations and not-for-profits. It's a very challenging thing to wrangle, and I applaud you especially because you're scoping that out as wide and as member-friendly as you possibly can, probably to that detriment of being able to make some things happen there.
I mean, it would be nice if we had funding and stuff like so many of these other organizations do, but that's not a thing. And I should bring this up as well. So to joining, being a member of Our Fair Go is $1 for most disabled people. $1 a year is our due structure. Family members can join for $5 a year, and other accomplices, it's $10 a year. We do have a $0 a year fee structure for a few groups like Indigenous people and a few others as well, and if people need it as well, where there's some disabled people who don't have control over their finances, but mostly it was set at that so that everybody, the vast majority of disabled people could pay that without having to rely on other people, and could pay their dues themselves without, and have that control, which is great. But that means we have very little money, very, very little money. And so
that was going to be my next question for you in terms of how organizations can start supporting, like that council over in WA did, and start working towards to minimize what their supply chains look like as well. But how can they help throw money at you, get resources? Because building an advocacy problem, building training, going marketing, building this out there is volunteers and actual legwork and people doing this on the ground is 100% important. Money is also required as well.
Yeah, well, there's lots of things. I've been in contact with a lot of local government areas, because the federal government has not been receptive, and neither of any of the states, to changing the laws around subminimum wage. But we can work on local councils, and even if some of them aren't, there's so many, so it's easy to get some of them on board. That kind of stopped while the election was happening, but I'll try and follow up with them and see what happens. Once there's more people in leadership positions, we can hopefully delegate and have more people following up. So I think that if there are people listening who are connected to councils who want to do something about it, hey, reach out. It's great. I'd love to hear from you. If people want to join as either members or supporting members, that would be great. We need more of that, or more people who want to volunteer, just because we're really working with a skeleton crew. So just things like handling the website, and our website is www.ourfairgo.org.au. I put it together, which is why it looks so shoddy. I'd really like to find some Zoomer who could just take it over and make it look pretty. Unfortunately, the rest of the board is also old people who don't know what they're doing as well. See, old people, it's another elder millennial and a Gen Xer. Somehow I got slated with it because their technical capacity was worse than mine was. So, just things like that.
That's not entirely true. I like your website, actually, personally, because I think it's really easy to read, and it's really easy to navigate, and there's very few words on each page, which I think is very disability friendly. And nothing flashes, nothing moves, thank goodness, because that's one of my pet peeves. And the other thing I think is fantastic about your website is your acknowledgement at the bottom. Your wording is so fantastic. When I read it, I was like, oh my goodness, that's one of the best ones I've seen.
That was Tabs who wrote that. It took me so long to get it formatted the way that it is, so that it was, very stable and as disability friendly as I could make it. Yeah, so I definitely use more volunteers helping with things. Money, we have we have a bank account that people can donate to through a VSB. There's now there's now a Stripe account for people to donate. I actually have not had anyone test this yet. I need someone to send $1 to it so I can see if it works, and then I can link it to the website. So like donations and volunteers, I guess, the big things. So people can join, and then in a couple months we'll have board elections, and then I can just dump a bunch of work on people. No, that's not how I should word it. Board elections, and then people can ascend into leadership positions and have great titles to go with their names, and it'll
do some work. There's some work involved with this.
It'll be resume building, No, I mean, seriously, one of the reasons that, one of my goals in doing this is building leadership capacity within the disability community and having disabled people able to learn skills and get experience doing stuff. And, it's very difficult for disabled people, especially people with intellectual disabilities, and to some degree other cognitive disabilities as well, to get elected on boards and to get into leadership positions. There's usually a very finite number of organizations where that's even possible, and they're usually exclusive to that diagnosis. And so I wanted to have that there. And then I have a skill set. I have a very specific skill set with, I've gotten sub wage bans passed in multiple countries now. I actually am, as far as I know, the only person who's passed those laws in 2 countries. And that's very useless if I don't teach anyone else how to do that. So this is another opportunity for me to lecture at people and, get them to learn how that works. And then I can retire and, go off the board in a couple of years, and other people can take it over, it'll be great. But there's a lot of different goals in how, in capacity building from an advocacy perspective. And one of the advantages of this kind of topic is that it's not so esoteric that people don't understand it. It's very universally, you'd be hard pressed to find disabled people that don't support us receiving at least minimum wage. And many, many disabled people can speak from personal experience how it's impacted them. So it's a very good entry into advocacy.
Absolutely it is. And also
Effective Advocacy 101 by Shaun.
The other thing, that it does is also opens up that conversation that we had last time about also finding other things for people to do. And that if the job that you've got doesn't fit the person with a disability, then modify the job, and that they don't have to always pack sprinkler heads. They can, do a wide variety, people can do a wide variety of things. We just, as a collective, all need to think more creatively. And I think our Fair Go can do a lot with reminding people of that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So our the website has in the resource section a bit of studies linked in addition to news articles. But I think that besides having those sort of academic resources linked, the other advantage is the people it brings together, because already there's something like 35 members right now, I think, but and like 15 supporting members. I'm going off the top of my head, give or take a couple. that's a large number of it's a large amount of human knowledge there. And we know the systems can be better designed than they currently are in this country. And we know that there's best practice that's not being utilized.
Yeah, exactly. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you would like to tell us about your campaign or Our Fair Go?
Yeah, so we were pretty busy during the election because the board had decided it was very important to advertise candidate positions on subminimum wage. So we released, I guess they were like info cards on all the candidates on every electorate. So on each Senate race and on all 150 electorates. And so the candidates were asked if they agreed with the wording in the campaign. So that was, I'll read it out to you. It is unacceptable that in 2025, disabled people living in Australia can be paid as little as $3.01 per hour, while the minimum wage for others is $24.10 an hour. And it was a yes or no question. So there were a number of people who wanted to kind of hedge and, well, it depends or whatever. And I'm like, that's a no then. You know, it's yes, no, or no response. But no response is only if like I didn't hear from you and I didn't know that you had seen it. So there were a number of people that I listed as no, and it was no because you didn't support it. You know, like it's a yes or no.
No response is still a response.
It is, but the only reason I had that is because I don't know for sure that the candidates saw the email, even though they probably did. I mean, realistically,
at least you're being considerate there.
Realistically, we know they. Realistically, we know they probably saw the email, but you know, there might have been out of the hundreds who were no response. Maybe a handful did not legitimately see the email, or their staffers kept it. But the reason that's a yes or no question is we're wanting you to pass this. We want you to pass legislation to give us equal rights and give us access to the minimum wage. That is a yes or no proposition. You're either going to pass it or not. So you can't sit here and meander on the fence, because if you're not passing it, then it's a no. And so I did see some other organization that did it like a stoplight system, which is kind of what we had in mind, like red, orange, green, but then they did a black one for oppose. So they had like red for non-support and black for oppose. And I'm like, okay, maybe next election I'll do that, because there were like some hard no's. And then they were like the no's that were just like, I don't want to take a position on this until other people in my party take a position on it. And, that's a little bit different. Like you can kind of move those people, but the hard no's are just like, there's no point. And so, it was interesting. So that's where we got the 297 candidates in support, and actually published. If you go on Our Fair Go, you can still see the full list of who supported and who didn't. Even though I've taken it off the main campaign letter now because it's not relevant. If you're curious about it, but we published those and like updated, and I still got a response. Like some candidate signed on literally the day, like the Friday before election day. And I'm like, pre-poll's been going on for 2 weeks now. Like where have you been? At a certain point, we just stopped updating the graphics because I wasn't updating them. Like we had a volunteer doing it, and he just kind of stopped doing it. And I'm like, I'm gonna really be upset about this, But yeah, so that was interesting because I did like shame a few candidates. We did shame a few candidates into flipping their position, and did get one to reaffirm their no in a public venue. And I'm like, this is terrible. This is great. So yeah, it was really interesting. So that was a So that was a whole thing that happened. I think through the course of doing all that, we got 2 new people signed on. We got David Pocock and Fatima Payman, both senators. It was interesting because David Pocock was a no last year, would not sign on, and then he ended his ties with the Teal Funder guy, the Simon Holmes Accord, and then the first policy that he supported was ending minimum wage, which is it was very interesting, but we lost several supporters. Kylie Tink, the Teal Independent from New South Wales, and then 3 Greens, Stephen Bates, Max Chandler Mather, and Adam Bant were all supportive. They weren't reelected, so we're a little worse off than we were before. But well, 2 senators for 4 MPs. I don't know how you want to look at that, but yeah. Beyond that, there's just a lot of stuff to do, I guess. Like, we don't have charity status. There's a charity application, but it's pretty complex and very long, and we haven't been able to finish it yet. And these are, that's something that's going to have to take more support to do, I guess. Trying to do like easy read versions of like the application to get, which would be more accessible to people with intellectual disabilities. That would cost several $1,000s. And that's more money than we have in the accounts by far. Somebody did do an easy read version. Our Voice South Australia did an easy read advertisement that we're looking for board members for free, which is great. But there's just a lot of stuff, and there's only 3 of us on the board right now, so it's just a lot of limited capacity for trying to run a national organization.
I hope that coming on this podcast helps, because to me, ending subminimum wage is such a no-brainer, and I can't get my head around politicians saying like a hard no is mind-boggling to me.
I got somebody who said, let me see if I could find the email. This is my favorite hard no, my favorite, most outrageous. I have a whole section of my email folder where I put these things.
While you're clicking,
I know a number of disabled people, and they work in children workshops, and they get disability pension, and they are quite well off. One person has saved over $20,000 while he's been working over the years.
And living with their parents, probably. So that's on their parent. Like,
I had to explain this. I'm just like, a disability pension and working at a shelter workshop is probably still less than minimum wage, because the pension is a fraction of minimum wage. And adding, like, I tried to explain this with math to someone, and I'm like, here's a minimum, $3 an hour. Here's the pension, like, and also $20,000 over years is not very much money. They're quite well off. The absolute best one is still the one who told me, the guy who accused me of being like the anti-child labor campaigners who took jobs away from children.
Yeah, that's got to be my favorite too. I remember that one.
Yeah.
Now, quickly before we wrap up, Shaun, for any of the businesses or wonderful people out there that have deep pockets, more so that you can get your link tested, is your link ready to go?
It's not on the website right now.
Well, we can shove it.
I mean, honestly, by the time you air this, it probably will be on the website.
Well, we can shove this up in our show notes. So if any of our wonderful listeners are able to throw $1 or preferably even more in there to give it a run for you, please let us know. shout out through to connect with Shaun as well, just to make sure that he actually received and everything's worked and we haven't sent some money out into the ether that isn't being utilized. But that's something that if someone's able to help out with, or many someone's are able to help with it, please jump on board. Because as you can see, Shaun is a fantastic advocate. He can definitely get some mountains moved with the 2 countries that he's gone through. So hopefully we can get some work going here in Australia with both people power and some bit more backing for him to be able to get in front of the right people in the right places and get the right things going.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, thank you so much, Shaun, for coming back on and updating us on all the amazing things you've been doing.
Thank you.
Absolutely love it. Shaun, keep it going. And thanks for listening.
Yeah. Bye.
Huzzah.
Thank you for listening. Please share with people you know. Until next time, as the Green Brothers say, don't forget to be awesome.